Thank you, John. Appreciate it. I'm David Stark. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Bay East Association of Realtors. And just as a point of clarification, do any of you know my father?
We hope not.
My father is Charles Henry Stark. He was a community college professor for a number of years, a violinist. He races motorcycles, races sailboats. So my father is Charles Henry Stark. I am not related to Pete Stark. How many lab employees or retirees do we have here in the audience today? I am also related to Ann Stark, who writes for some of the Livermore Lab publications. You've probably read her articles. So she's that motorcycle racing wife of mine. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you this morning about what's happening in real estate. We've got some high-tech aids to help us out, including a voice-actuated slide advancement system. So if you could give a round of applause to the voice-actuated slide advancement system. And he responds to multiple different sounds, including beep, next slide, and let's do it. So, beep. So I'm not a realtor. We have realtors in the room. Marianne Roja is back there. She actually pays my salary. Do we have any other realtors in the room? Oh, Pat is out there. Okay, we got. Yeah, that I thought you looked familiar. Yeah. So the folk that pay my salary here, so I gotta do a good job. Well, the question that I get, even though I'm not a realtor, but I do work for about 4,000 of them, is has the real estate market recovered? You've been hearing a lot in the media about maybe prices are coming up, but you've also probably been hearing about interest rates being low, maybe some challenges getting purchase financing. So to answer this question, Beep, you really have to define what your perspective is. And when we talk about perspective, there are basically 4 different things that you've got to keep in mind. Beep. So the first one, Beep. How many homes are out there for sale? Because if the market is flooded with homes for sale, does that mean that we've got a market that's recovered? Or does that mean people are bailing out of the Tri-Valley and they want to get out of here as soon as possible? So you got to look at supply. Beep. You got to look at how many homes are selling. If you got a bunch of homes on the market but none of them are selling, is that a healthy market? Beep. The one that you probably typically think about in health is sales prices, and that's probably where you wanted to start this presentation. We're going to talk about sales prices, but we've got to talk about these other things, and we have to talk about the last bullet point, Beep, which would be troubled properties. And troubled properties includes both short sale properties and foreclosed properties. So to answer this question about has the market recovered, we do have to look at all 4 of these things. Beep. So we're going to start with the supply of homes for sale. I'm sick of beep. You want to do next? Next. Okay, let's try next. So for this presentation, I'm not going to talk about the national real estate market. You okay? I'm not going to talk about the California real estate market. I'm not even going to talk about real estate in Alameda County because those markets don't exist. And my apologies and all due respect to the National Association of Realtors and the press releases they issue, but really the only markets that matter are your own markets in your own neighborhood. So for this presentation, we're going to concentrate on Tri-Valley, and specifically Danville, San Ramon, Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore. We're going to stay here in this area. Because if we expand beyond the Tri-Valley, you get into some very different markets, and you're comparing apples and oranges. So this slide, we're going to go back to a year ago, and there's a lot of lines here. They're all color-coded. Livermore is this line here, and it indicates how many single-family homes were listed for sale on a monthly basis. And you can see from a year ago, Livermore has dropped significantly. As a matter of fact, most of the markets in the Tri-Valley, with even Dublin, if you look at year to year, have all dropped. So there are fewer homes for sale. Why is that? Well, the reasons are manifold. It could be that this is a swell place to live, and it is. This is a nice place to live. It could be people are nervous about the economy. They're concerned about not getting any money out of their homes. It could be that folk do want to move up or move out, but for whatever reason they can't qualify for purchase financing. So there's a lot of different reasons why there aren't as many homes for sale. Now if we stop the presentation right here, you'd look at this and say, well golly, if we're down significantly, and Beep, let's take a look at some numbers here. If we're down by 60% in terms of homes listed for sale, prices should be going through the roof. Do we have any economists in the room or anyone that took Economics 101? Supply and demand? Well, supply is significantly down. So if we stop the presentation right now, you might say, well, golly, I'm a homeowner, and if there are fewer homes for sale, and I wanted to refinance or sell my home, then I should be able to get whatever price I want. Well, keep that in mind when we get to the sales price. So from this metric, well, if you're looking to buy a home, your choices have been cut by 60%. So it's not real healthy for you. If you're looking to sell your home, well, golly, you should be in Fat City because there's even more competition for those buyers. So keep that in mind. Next slide. Let's talk about what's happening with sales activity. Pete? Let's give it up again for the slide advancement system. Thank you, sir. I really do appreciate it. And he's handsome too. I like that. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back again to where we were last year, and you can take a look at sales activity. And you can see starting in January, no matter. And I'm sorry if you can't see these slides. They're really good looking. They're colorful and. Okay. Okay. Do something like this. Starting in January, regardless of where you are in the Tri-Valley, sales activity has increased, and this is pretty standard if you follow real estate. Why does sales activity increase starting in the spring? It's because kids are going to be out of school. No one wants to move during the holiday season. This is pretty standard. You see the peak of sales activity in the summer months when the kids are out of school. So if you just take a look at the last 12 months, yeah, certainly sales are up from where we were in the winter and the fall, and they're up everywhere. Now again, let's take a look at the actual numbers here, Beep. Now in Livermore, month to month, it says we're down 4%, but in terms of actual units, we're basically where we were a year ago. So when I talked about your perspective, let's go back one slide. If you're looking at things on a month-to-month basis, golly, if we were sitting here just comparing these few months here, March and through May, you'd think, well, my goodness, the market's on fire. But if you go back, the fall, you see sales activity is going down. So when you're reading these press releases or hearing these bloggers or watching the talking heads on TV, and every month, California Association, National Association, they pump out these press releases, say month-to-month changes. Keep that in mind. Think critically when you're getting information about the real estate market, because it really does depend on perspective. If we go back to this slide with the numbers, so we're, that one, perfect, thank you. We're basically where we were a year ago. So what does this mean? Well, it means that even with all the nervousness that folk might have about real estate, we're selling about the same number of homes as we were a year ago. And keep in mind, that's with a limited supply as well. So the takeaway there is, if you're putting your home on the market, it's probably going to sell. So that's a data point for your perspective also. Dublin up 13%, Pleasanton up 21%. Those are percentages in terms of actual units. It's a 4-unit increase in Dublin, and in Pleasanton from 62 to 75 as well. So regardless of where you are on this section of 580, the market's pretty healthy. Homes are selling, which is not an easy thing these days, and we're going to talk about why in just a second. Marianne, feel free to stand up and interrupt me at any time. You can throw a dinner roll at me.
You're doing a great job.
Okay, let's give it up for Marianne Roja. Thank you. Thank you. Pat, I'm sure you'll talk to me afterwards, so yeah, in the parking lot. Next slide, please. Do we want to talk about sales prices?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, yes?
Yes.
Okay, well, since the guy running the computer wants to talk about it, we're going to talk about sales prices. Let's talk about sales prices. This is a slightly different slide. We're going to go back to the beginning of the century. And why are we going to do that? Because there was a fundamental change in the world and in real estate specifically starting in about 2005. We saw a significant increase in the first part of the last decade. Things topped out around 2006, and then there was the major correction. So over this period of time, where is Livermore? Well, we're a little bit higher than where we were 10 years ago. What's interesting, though, is this period in time. The double-digit year-on-year price appreciation that we saw 2004 to 2006, and then the double-digit price deflation that we saw after the world changed. Now, I've said twice now the world changed. The big thing about the world changing, particularly in real estate, is how people purchased homes. Specifically, what kind of loans they were getting. And the loans that folk were using to buy homes in this period when the market was going crazy simply ceased to exist here. And that changed the world in terms of real estate. That easy money is gone. And when the easy money was gone, it was difficult for people to act on demand. And it was the unlimited ability to act on your desires that drove the price appreciation during this period, and it was the inability to act on your desires during this period which caused the major corrections. So what does this mean? That's a nice thing to say, it's good for a cocktail party, but what does this mean? If you look at the last couple years, prices have basically stabilized here in the Tri-Valley. And what's interesting is that these last couple years have not been easy years for the national economy, for the international economy, for things happening here in California. So even with all the nervousness that we've experienced, specifically here in California, Northern California and Alameda County, folk are still buying homes in the Tri-Valley, and the sales prices are still, at least in Livermore, north of $400,000, which in my book is a lot of money. Let's take a look at the last 12 months. Beep. So here we are, September of last year through August of this year, and what these lines tell you is that there's been very little month-to-month change in prices, regardless of where you are in the Tri-Valley. Let's look at the real numbers here. Beep. So in Livermore, we saw a 14% increase from $411,500 a year ago to $470,275. Dublin and Pleasanton, some minor increases as well. And I will stand by my statement that $470,000 odd, that's a lot of money. That's almost $500,000. This is the median sales price, which means it's right in the middle. It's not average. It's right in the middle. And this is based on single-family homes, resale homes, so not new homes. Just let that sink in for a second. So while folk have talked about the real estate market coming back, we talked about the crash, we talked about the correction, in terms of real numbers, the median price is $470,000. That's a lot of money. Who doesn't think that's a lot of money? Maybe just, since I try to live in my means, and I think it's a lot of money. Next. I mentioned troubled property, so let's talk about what a troubled property is. Start with short sales. Short sales is pretty simple. You owe the bank $400,000. You, for whatever reason, are selling your home, but an appraiser is telling the bank that that home is only worth $300,000. So you are that's what's known as a short sale situation. You have to, let's go back one before we give them the good stuff. You have to convince the bank to take less money than what you owe. You're selling short. Foreclosure means that for whatever reason, you as a homeowner, you've defaulted on the terms of your mortgage, either through failure to pay or whatever reason, and the bank has now taken that property back. The bank owns it, and they're responsible for marketing it. Two slightly different things. In the case of a short sale, typically the property owner still lives in the home. They may or may not be making payments on the mortgage. In a foreclosure, in many cases, the property owner doesn't live in the home anymore, and it's the bank's asset to deal with. Let's talk about what this all means here in the Tri-Valley. Next slide. So, lots of graphs and charts. We're going to focus on Dublin, Livermore, and Pleasanton. The green bar represents what we would call a normal sale. It's not a short sale, it's not a foreclosure. This rust color represents a combination of both the short sales and the foreclosures. And then we're going to break it out with this yellow bar represents the short sales, the red bar, the foreclosures. What does this mean? So, the period of September last year to August of this year, in Livermore, 57% of the transactions involving single-family detached homes were normal sales. Do the math. That means that about 42% were troubled properties. So almost half were troubled properties. To dig into that a little further, a third of all the sales were short sales, and about 14% were foreclosures. So it's not just happening in Mountain House or on the other side of the Altamont and other communities or Oakland. Troubled properties are characterizing these markets as well, including Pleasanton with 20% of its transactions, and Dublin with almost 40% of its transactions being troubled properties as well. Another way to look at this, beep, is why this matters. I know that you're interested, at least one person's interested in sales prices. This is why troubled properties matter. So the median sales price in Livermore for a non-troubled property, what we call an equity sale, was $475,000. For a short sale, it was $375,000, so $100,000 less. And for a foreclosure, it was $348,000. This is why every homeowner needs to care about troubled properties. Because if you want to do a new kitchen, or send a kid or a grandkid to college, or for whatever reason, pull some money out of your house, you want to do an equity line of credit, you've got to get an appraiser to come out, and that appraiser needs to determine a value for your home. And that value is based not only on just what you think your home is worth, but it's based on comparable sales in your area. Well, when that appraiser goes out, are they going to look at the homes that are coming in at $475,000? Yeah. But almost half of the other homes that they're going to look at are going to be in the $375,000 and $348,000 area. So no matter what you've done to your home to fix it up, the appraiser has to look at these other properties, which unfortunately are selling for significantly less. So when we talk about how healthy the market is, this is something you've got to keep in mind. Because if you think your home's going to appraise at a certain amount, so you can take that fabulous vacation or put in that fantastic kitchen or do whatever, it's not what you think your home's worth, it's what other homes in the area are appraising for. Do we have any appraisers in the room? Oh goody, now I can talk smack about appraisers. There were some federal policies that went into effect a few years ago that fundamentally changed the relationship between appraisers and the rest of the world. And we no longer have appraisers that are expert in specific areas. We now have appraisers that may be coming from out of area that have no idea about what really establishes the value of a home. But one thing they are going to look at, they are going to look at these short sales and they are going to look at these foreclosures. And these kinds of things can make or break a transaction, whether you're looking at purchasing a home or refinancing. Isn't this a great uplifting presentation? Aren't you glad that John Shirley brought me in today? Blame everything on John. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to buy a foreclosed home and make $150,000?
Yes.
I just wondered. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible, depending on what you do to that home, depending on who you sell it to, depending on what that buyer can qualify in terms of purchase financing. Absolutely. Does that mean that you all are going to go out and purchase foreclosed homes and make $150,000 because Dave Stark from the local realtor board said so? No. Your results may vary. Next slide. So we focus primarily on single-family homes, but we are going to talk about condos because the situation is even more dire for condos, and if I haven't already put you in a sour mood, well, maybe I can now. So it's the same color setup here. In Livermore, 37% of the transactions in this period, last 12 months, were normal sales. 62% were troubled. Now, why is that? Why is it so much higher than single-family homes? Well, it speaks to the fundamental economics of many first-time home buyers. Folks these days that are looking to get into ownership, especially if they're first-time buyers, or maybe they don't have the best credit, a lot of folk get into condos. And the folk that purchase condos, unfortunately, they are at a greater risk of defaulting on their mortgage or, for whatever reason, having to sell short. That's just the nature of condos. Unfortunately, the entry-level homes have been hit even harder than single-family homes when it comes to short sales and foreclosures. So we're looking at 62% were troubled. Of that, 40% short sales, about 20% foreclosures. Scary numbers, but what does it really mean? Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's that delta. $300,000 was the median sales price for an equity sale, drops to $236,500 for a short sale, and $185,000 for a foreclosure. I can see the wheels turning back there. You know, you're sitting next to a realtor, I'm just saying. A couple of them are there, so they may have business cards. Just saying. So this is, you know, I'm a little glib on this, but this is serious business. This is very serious business. Especially if you've got family that are looking to purchase a condo these days and they need to qualify for a mortgage. It goes back to what I said, the appraiser, let's say they want to buy one of these $300,000 condos. and they're working with the bank and they've got the appraiser out there and they need to borrow $250, well, guess what? The appraiser is looking at sales prices in the $230 to $185 range. It's going to be difficult for this $300,000 condo that they want to buy. It's going to be difficult for it to appraise. And those appraisers have a huge, no offense to the realtors in the room, but it's really the appraisers that are running the show these days. Point, counterpoint? Pat, Marianne?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah. Sir?
So why is the first, the red one is higher than the green one?
In the case of Dublin,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, the banks were able to sell their condos for about $30,000 more than a short sale. It just happens that way. There was a month in 2011 where for single-family homes, there were some foreclosed properties that were selling higher than the equity properties because there were probably some big mansions that sold. So it just happens that the banks are able to sell the REOs for more than they're willing to take on a short sale. It's just wacky. Interesting time to be alive. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the forces that have put us in this situation. Beep. Beep. This is a great place to live. It really is. John and I were talking earlier about where we're all from. My wife and I are from Southern California. We moved to the Bay Area about 12 years ago. Love it. Love the Tri-Valley. Love where we live. It's a place where you don't need to move out when you go off to college and come back. You can find a job here. You can raise a family here. You can retire here. It's a nice place to live. You got a fantastic downtown here in Livermore. You got a wine country, for crying out loud. There's no wine drinkers in this room here, are there? I didn't think so. It's the morning club that drinks the wine. How they can get up in the morning, I don't know. But this is a great place to live. Demand is high, especially with fuel prices that continue to climb. Those folk that have been sitting on 580 going over the hill for years, golly, I could be home now. People want to live here. The supply is shrinking. I talk to realtors every day because they pay my salary, and what do I hear? There's no inventory. I'm having a lot of trouble securing a listing. I'm getting multiple offers. I'm having to compete with lots of other buyers. The supply just simply isn't out there. We get a lot of questions about the shadow inventory, these properties that banks own. One of these banks going to release these properties. The bottom line is, and you saw statistically and graphically, there are fewer homes for sale here in the Tri-Valley and Livermore specifically. Next. The big one, and there's actually going to be some redundancy on these next bullet points because they all relate to access to purchase financing. Even though mortgage interest rates are historically low, one of the outcomes from the whole mortgage meltdown, or whatever you want to call it, is that it's difficult to secure a loan these days. You have to be alive, you have to have some money in the bank, you've got to have pretty good credit, you've got to have a job typically that pays pretty good money, and then you have to be working with a bank that's actually interested in loaning you money. Are there bankers in the room?
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, right? Okay. I'll see you in the parking lot. And this is really, where we're at, is the ability to secure a loan. And when we looked at how flat those purchase prices were, it doesn't matter if this is a swell place to live. It doesn't matter if there are very few homes listed for sale. If you can't get a loan to purchase that home, the sellers are going to have to respond. If the home is sitting on the market, they're going to have to respond by keeping prices at a level where people can actually afford to buy. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the supply, when you showed around 90 homes available for sale, did that include the trouble?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yes, it did. Next. Cash is king. So if you can take this out of the equation, if you saved your money or you're an investor, you are much more competitive when you're making those offers. Because the seller doesn't have to worry about the home appraising or the buyer being able to qualify for mortgage. The cash is there. And that's something that I hear from our realtors all the time, is that my buyer was beat by an offer that was all cash. Next. How many of you have heard this expression, there's only three things that matter in real estate? Location, location, location. Y'all heard that? Well, it's true, except the location is a little bit different these days. That location now is that location is Washington, D.C. And there's a few people chuckling, well, what does that mean? Because it's the lawmakers in Washington, D.C. that are determining not only interest rates, but the policies and practices for the big government-sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, FHA. Those are the folk that are really running the show. And yeah, location certainly in Livermore does make a difference. Springtown versus south side of town versus downtown. It all certainly makes a difference. But when you're talking about location vis-a-vis real estate these days, it's really what's happening in Washington, D.C. So as you're listening to those stories about policy changes with the government-sponsored enterprises, pay attention. Pay attention. When you start hearing stories about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac changing their underwriting guidelines, that's when you really want to pay attention, because those changes 3,000 miles away that are certainly going to resonate here in the Tri-Valley in terms of people able to participate in real estate. Last slide, because this is the hook. I'm David Stark. My father is Charles Henry Stark, great guy. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Bay East Association of Realtors. If you have any questions, I use this fantastic communication technology called the telephone. Anybody remember the telephone? I do. I use it every day. I love it. You can also reach me by email. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's time for questions. There's time for 2 questions. Yes, sir.
From your early chart, it would appear, all things considered, that the Dublin market was more stable than any market in the Tri-Valley. Is that right?
Yes, the Dublin market is pretty stable for a couple reasons. Number one, it's a smaller market in general, so you're not going to see these wide swings in terms of supply or sales activity. It's got a variety of different product that's available. You've got a lot of new product. You've got older homes in established neighborhoods. So if you're looking either for a condo, you don't want to deal with a yard. You just want something brand new, move in, ready to go. They've got that. But if you want a more traditional home, they've got that as well. Plus, they've got a good school system. No offense, they've got a good school system. That Dublin High School is basically a brand new campus, and it's a pretty cool place to live. Not as cool as Livermore, but it's a cool place to live. Next question, the last question. Hopefully, it's a hard-hitting softball. Who do you want?
Oh, you can do it.
Okay, you're going to get fined because you get the last question. I know how this Rotary stuff works. Yes, sir.
Distressed sales were about 25% less in price than regular sales. Is that typical throughout the whole market, and does that always apply? And as a follow-on,
Double fine because it's a 2-part question.
Yeah, okay.
Second part of your question?
I was just wondering whether the banks, when they finally sell a repossessed property, tend to take out the mortgage themselves for the new owners.
Okay, so the question is that delta between the lower sales price between an equity sale and a foreclosure consistent throughout the area? Yes. Yes, it's rare for us to see anything less than about a $50,000 to $75,000 difference in sales price between median and foreclosures. So that cuts across all geographies that we study in Alameda County. In terms of the financing used to purchase a foreclosed property, not necessarily. I think it just depends on the dynamics of the transaction. And there's some real estate professionals here that would be happy to give you some more information on that, because they're the ones that are dealing with these transactions every day. That's a great question, by the way. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And John, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. We have a gift for you. You've got to make a choice, either some good wine from our valley or some good old...
I'm going with the wine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm one of those wine.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Done real quick.